My name is Vanessa Holloway. I'm 40 years old. 3 weeks ago, I gave birth to a baby girl on a narrow cot in a women's shelter on the east side of the city under fluorescent lights that hummed like they were irritated to still be alive. The nurse on duty had tired eyes and gentle hands. She told me when to breathe. She tucked the blanket tighter around my legs when I started shaking. She never asked how a woman who once lived in a 5-bedroom house with heated floors and a marble kitchen ended up delivering a child in a room with chipped paint, donated linens, and a plastic bassinet with a faded inventory sticker still attached to the side. She didn't need to ask. The answer was already written all over me. In the hospital bracelet, I kept twisting around my wrist because I couldn't stop needing to feel something cold and tight. In the secondhand sweatshirt I'd borrowed from the shelter donation room because none of my old clothes fit anymore, and none of my old life belonged to me. In the way I flinched every time someone said the word family, like it was still something I could claim. Most women here have stories that begin with bad luck. A landlord who raised the rent, a husband who hit too hard one last time, a company that downsized, a diagnosis, a funeral, one terrible turn that knocked the rest of their lives sideways. That is not my story. I am here because for 17 years, I took a good man's loyalty, his money, his trust, his name, and the life he built with his bare hands. And I used them to support lies I knew were rotting through the foundation of everything around me. I am here because I confused safety with boredom, because I mistook steadiness for weakness, because I married a man who would have protected me from almost anything in this world, and then I spent nearly 2 decades betraying him with the one person who could have shattered him most, his younger brother. His name was Travis Holloway. And the worst part of that sentence is not that I can say it now. The worst part is how many years I lived with it and still managed to wake up every morning, pour coffee into a white ceramic mug, kiss my husband on the cheek, and pretend I was still the woman he believed I was. My husband's name is Graham Holloway. Even now, with everything destroyed, his name still lands in me differently than anyone else's. Softer, heavier, like something I should never say casually again. Graham was not flashy. He was not thrilling in the cinematic way people glorify when they talk about passion. He was disciplined, responsible, maddeningly dependable. The kind of man who fixed the loose cabinet hinge without being asked. The kind of man who noticed when the tires on my SUV were wearing thin and replaced them before winter. The kind of man who kept spare phone chargers in the kitchen drawer, checked the smoke detectors every spring, and packed extra granola bars in the glove compartment in case the kids got hungry after practice. He was the kind of man women say they want, then secretly worry might be too predictable to make them feel alive. I didn't just worry about that. I used it against him. He worked as a senior project manager for a commercial construction company, long days, good salary, excellent benefits. He left the house before sunrise most mornings and came home tired, shoulders tight under his dress shirts, still asking what the kids needed before he asked for anything for himself. For 17 years, Graham built a life sturdy enough for all of us to live inside. And for 17 years, I kept slipping out the back door emotionally, sometimes literally, to run toward the man who made me feel reckless instead of safe. If this story sounds ugly, that's because it is. I'm done trying to tell it beautifully. People keep talking about what happened to me, and every time they do, I want to interrupt them. I want to correct the sentence before it leaves their mouths, because this didn't happen to me. I did it. I chose it. Again and again and again. There were warning signs early. That's another truth I avoided for years, because it made me feel less like a victim of my own impulses and more like what I actually was, deliberate. I met Graham when I was 22. He was calm in a way that made other people slower around him. Not because he demanded it, because he made chaos feel unnecessary. I had spent most of my life surrounded by emotional weather, raised in a house where everything was always one disappointment away from becoming a performance. My mother cried loudly. My father judged quietly. Love in our house was real, but conditional enough that I learned early how to measure a room before speaking in it. Then I met Graham, and suddenly there was this man who didn't need drama to feel sincere. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He remembered small details. He showed up on time. When he said he would call, he called. When he promised something, it happened. Back then, I told myself I loved how secure he made me feel. I did love that. I just didn't understand that part of me also resented it. Resented how little room there was for emotional theater around him. Resented that he couldn't be manipulated into grand gestures because he already lived inside a constant, quiet kind of devotion. There was nothing to chase, nothing to win, no cliff edge. Then there was Travis. Travis was younger than Graham by 3 years, but he moved through rooms like rules were just suggestions other people obeyed because they lacked imagination. He was handsome in a dangerous, unfinished way, restless energy, lazy smile, the kind of eye contact that lasted half a second too long. He worked inconsistent jobs, changed apartments often, always had a reason. Something wasn't his fault. He was charming enough to make irresponsibility look like freedom. When I first met him, I knew exactly what he was. That didn't stop me. There are women who fall into terrible choices by inches. I was not one of them. I recognized the cliff. I walked toward it anyway. It started with glances I pretended not to understand. Then private jokes. Then moments that lingered too long at family dinners. A hand at the small of my back when no one was looking. A text that crossed a line but still left enough room for denial. I could have stopped it there. I didn't. On the night before my wedding, Travis hugged me a second too long in the hotel hallway and whispered, "You still have time." I knew what he meant. I married Graham anyway. Not because I had chosen wisely, not because I had ended the danger. I married him because part of me wanted both lives at once, the safety of one man and the intensity of another. I wanted to be adored and destabilized, protected and pursued. I wanted goodness waiting at home and temptation waiting somewhere just outside it. People like to act as if that kind of selfishness is complicated. It isn't. It is greed wearing lipstick. The first year of marriage should have been enough to wake me up. Graham was kind, consistent, earnest in a way that should have broken me open with gratitude. We bought our first house, a smaller one than the one we later lost, but beautiful in its own young, hopeful way. Blue shutters, sloping front yard, one cracked stepping stone path Graham said he'd fix when he had time. He adored me. And instead of letting that love humble me, I started treating it like infrastructure. Something so permanent, I could build anything ugly on top of it and assume it would hold. I had my first child at 24. Her name is Olivia. She is 16 now. She has Graham's steadiness, though not his blood. That sentence still feels obscene, even here alone. Olivia was the first deep fracture I buried, beneath a smile. I knew the dates. I knew what they meant. I knew whose child I was carrying before the pregnancy test finished developing in my shaking hand. I stood in our upstairs bathroom staring at that small pink proof, and instead of telling the truth while it was still only devastating, I chose the version of the future that preserved me. Graham came home that evening with takeout because I had mentioned I was tired the night before. I told him I was pregnant, and he looked at me like I had handed him the universe. He laughed, then cried. Then dropped to his knees and put both hands over my stomach like reverence had become muscle memory all at once. I watched him do that. I let him. That is the part no one can soften for me. Not my therapist, not the women here who sometimes mistake confession for growth. Not even me. I let a good man kneel in front of a lie and call it a miracle. Olivia was born on a wet November morning after 14 hours of labor. Graham never left the room except when a nurse made him go eat half a granola bar because his hands were shaking. He cut the cord. He kissed my forehead. He called his parents crying. He kept saying, "She's perfect. She's perfect," like he had been waiting his whole life for proof that joy could survive outside imagination. Travis sent one text that night. "How's my girl?" I deleted it after staring at it for 10 full minutes. Not because I felt guilty enough to stop. Because I wanted control over the evidence. That became the pattern. Not remorse. Management. My second child, Mason, was born 3 years later, then Noah 4 years after that. With each pregnancy, the same private math, the same silence, the same performance, the same man standing beside me with his whole heart open while I fed him a counterfeit version of fatherhood and let him love inside it. And he did love them. That is what destroys me now more than biology ever could. Graham was there for every fever, every nightmare, every school pickup, every scraped knee, every science fair project built too late the night before. He coached Mason's soccer team for 5 seasons. He learned how to braid Olivia's hair from online videos because I used to get impatient when she wouldn't sit still. He sat up with Noah through breathing treatments on winter nights, half asleep in the rocking chair, one hand rubbing circles over his back until dawn. He did those things not because they were obligations, because he was their father in every way that mattered, except the one I stole from him. There's a special kind of corruption in watching someone love what you've lied to them about and still continuing the lie. It does something to your insides. Not enough to stop you, apparently, just enough to make you quieter when you're alone. By the time Mason was 6 and Olivia was 9, we had moved into the bigger house, the one with the stone entryway and the enormous kitchen island, and the primary bedroom with windows facing the backyard maples. The house people complimented constantly. The house I thought represented success, as if square footage could convert fraud into legitimacy. Graham paid for almost everything: mortgage, utilities, car payments, insurance, school tuition for Olivia when she wanted to transfer, braces, soccer fees, piano lessons, summer camp, prescription copays, groceries so expensive I barely checked the total anymore. I worked part-time for a while at a cosmetic dental office after Olivia was born, then fewer hours, then none. I told Graham I wanted to focus on the children full-time. He never argued. He just adjusted the budget, moved money where it needed to go, and said, "Whatever makes life easier for you." That sentence used to irritate me. Now it haunts me. Whatever makes life easier for you. What I did with that generosity would be almost impressive if it weren't so vile. I used the time, the comfort, and the financial stability Graham provided to continue an affair with a man who offered me almost nothing except adrenaline and attention. Travis never built anything. He drifted from job to job, auto shops, delivery work, warehouse shifts, long gaps in between. He was careless with money, careless with promises, careless with everyone, really. But when he looked at me, I felt chosen in a way that was all heat and no future. I mistook that for love too long. Maybe because heat is easier to dramatize. Steadiness doesn't always announce itself. It just keeps the lights on. For years, I lived between those two male gravitational pulls and told myself I was managing the contradiction. At family barbecues, Travis played uncle with maddening ease. He tossed footballs in the yard with the boys, let Olivia mock his old truck, smirked at me across crowded patios while Graham stood next to the grill turning burgers for everyone. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt electrified. That is the most humiliating truth I can tell about myself. Even with all the goodness I had, I still found ways to feel deprived. Travis never paid for diapers, never contributed to school clothes, never mailed birthday money, never once showed up with a pediatric prescription and asked how he could help. His role in my life existed mostly in secret hours, suggestive messages, hotel afternoons, borrowed excuses, and the fantasy that being wanted intensely was somehow more valuable than being loved faithfully. Graham funded every part of the world those children grew inside. Travis hovered at the edge of it like smoke. And still I ran toward the smoke. It is easy now to frame all of this as addiction, compulsion, emotional damage, fear of stillness. My therapist has language for it. Clinical language, structured language, language that helps explain why some people sabotage stability because peace feels emotionally unfamiliar. Some of that may be true, but explanations are not absolutions. A beautiful label on rotten behavior does not make it less rotten. Last spring, everything began to crack. Not because I grew a conscience. Because truth is patient in a way liars never are. Noah needed routine blood work for a school medical form. Something simple, administrative. The kind of boring paperwork that moves through ordinary families without consequence. I wasn't even the parent who handled it. Graham did. He was better with deadlines, forms, logistics, all the invisible labor people praise mothers for, while men quietly do it in the background. I remember the day the call came because he didn't mention it immediately. That should have frightened me. Graham always mentioned things. If there was a permission slip, I heard about it. If the insurance portal was acting up, I heard about it. If the pharmacy was out of Noah's inhaler and he had to drive 20 extra minutes to another location, I heard about it over dinner while I nodded and half listened. But that evening, he came home, kissed my temple, asked what the kids wanted for dinner, and said nothing. Nothing. For the first time in 17 years, Graham knew something that could destroy me, and instead of raising his voice or demanding answers, he became quieter. That was the beginning. I know that now. Back then, I only noticed that he started watching more than he spoke, that he lingered over small details, that he began asking strangely precise questions in a tone so calm I answered them without thinking. Did Travis ever help with Olivia when she was a baby? Do you remember where you were the week I went to Denver that year Mason was conceived? Did Noah always have your father's eyes, or did that come later? Questions that drifted past me like dust motes in sunlight, barely visible, easy to ignore. I ignored them. because denial becomes reflex if you practice it long enough. One night I woke at 2:13 a.m. and found Graham sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, not moving, not scrolling his phone, just sitting there with both hands clasped between his knees. I asked if he was okay. He turned and looked at me with an expression I still cannot fully describe. Not rage, not grief, not even hatred. Recognition, maybe, like he had finally seen the shape of the thing that had been living beside him for years. Then he said very softly, "Go back to sleep, Vanessa." I did. Because cowardice doesn't always look dramatic either. Sometimes it looks like rolling over under expensive sheets while your husband sits in the dark, already beginning to bury you in his mind. By the end of that month, the air inside the house had changed. Nothing visible, everything different. The children still argued over chargers and cereal, and whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher. Graham still packed lunches. I still smiled when neighbors waved. We still hosted Sunday dinners twice that month. Travis still came once, late and grinning, carrying a six-pack and acting like charm could cover the smell of decay. But Graham had gone cold in a way that was almost impossible to prove. Not cruel, never messy, just measured. As if he had stepped back from the center of our life and started examining its beams. And somewhere beneath all that polished routine, beneath the marble counters and neatly folded laundry and the family calendar stuck to the refrigerator, something had already been set in motion. I didn't know it then. I know it now. By the time I realized Graham wasn't grieving in confusion, but planning in silence, the machinery had already begun to turn. And when it finally did, it would not just expose what I had done. It would strip me down to the truth of who I had been all along. The first thing I noticed was the quiet, not the absence of noise. Our house was never quiet. There were always footsteps, doors opening and closing, the low hum of the dishwasher, Olivia arguing with Mason about something that didn't matter, Noah asking questions that did. Life continued in all the ways that make a house feel full. But underneath it, something had gone still. Graham stopped narrating his days. He used to come home and tell me about everything. Delays at job sites, a subcontractor who didn't show, a safety inspection that ran long. I used to half listen, stirring pasta sauce or folding laundry, offering distracted responses that he accepted without complaint. Now he didn't offer anything unless I asked. And when I did ask, his answers were complete. Too complete, precise in a way that closed the conversation instead of opening it. How was work? Productive. We finalized the contract for the Oak Ridge build. It'll start next quarter. No elaboration, no frustration, no invitation. Just information. At first I told myself he was stressed. Then I told myself I was imagining it. Because the alternative required a level of honesty I wasn't ready to face. The second thing I noticed was that he started coming home earlier. Graham had always worked long hours. That was part of the life we built, his time traded for our comfort. But suddenly, he was pulling into the driveway at 5:15 instead of 6:30, sometimes earlier. At first, I felt grateful, then observed. He would walk into the house, greet the kids, kiss my cheek, and then just be there, watching. Not in an obvious way, not in a way anyone else would question. He still helped with homework, still checked emails, still made dinner on nights I said I was too tired. But there was an attention behind his presence now, a kind of quiet accounting. Like he was taking inventory of time, of patterns, of me. I should have been afraid. Instead, I adjusted. That's the thing about long-term deception. You don't panic when something shifts. You adapt your lies to fit the new shape of reality. I became more careful, more deliberate. I deleted messages faster, shortened visits, avoided certain days. I told Travis we needed to be smarter, less obvious. He laughed when I said that. "Relax," he told me one afternoon, leaning back against his apartment couch like consequences were theoretical. "Your husband worships you. He's not suddenly going to turn into a detective." I remember the exact way he said it. Casual, certain, dismissive. I nodded like I agreed. But something in my chest tightened anyway. Because even then, I think part of me knew. Not what Graham was doing. But that the version of him I had relied on for 17 years, the man who trusted without question, who loved without suspicion, was no longer the man I was living with. And I had no idea what had replaced him. 3 days later, I found the first crack I couldn't ignore. It was small. Embarrassingly small, considering everything that followed. I was in the car, halfway to Travis's apartment, when I realized my phone battery was at 4%. I reached into the center console for the charger Graham kept there. It was gone. That shouldn't have mattered, except Graham never removed things like that without replacing them. He was the kind of man who bought extras so nothing would ever be missing. I checked the glove compartment. Nothing. Backseat. Nothing. I drove the rest of the way with my phone on low power mode, a flicker of unease sitting just beneath the surface of my thoughts. When I got to Travis's place, I didn't mention it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself a lot of things that day. All of them wrong. That afternoon lasted 1 hour and 47 minutes. I know that now. At the time, it felt like any other visit. Rushed, charged, wrapped in the illusion of secrecy that had long since stopped being real. When I left, I turned my phone back on. 2 missed calls, both from Graham. No voicemail, no text. That was unusual. He always texted if I didn't answer. Something simple. Call me when you can. Pick up milk on your way home. Nothing dramatic, just presence. I sat in the driver's seat staring at the screen for longer than I should have. Then I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Hey, I said, forcing normal into my voice. Sorry, I didn't see. I know, he said. 2 words. Flat. Not angry. Not suspicious. Just final. I just wanted to check in, he continued. Everything okay? Yeah, I said quickly. I was running errands. My phone died. A lie so practiced it didn't even feel like one anymore. There was a pause on the line. Not long, but long enough. Okay, he said. Drive safe. Then he hung up. No follow-up. No soft goodbye. No, I love you. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not enough to stop, but enough to notice. That night he made dinner. Grilled chicken. Roasted vegetables. The kind of balanced, thoughtful meal he defaulted to when he was trying to take care of us without making a point of it. The kids talked, argued, laughed. I barely tasted anything, because Graham kept looking at me. Not directly, not in a way anyone else would catch, but I felt it, like standing near a heat source you can't see but know is there. After dinner, Olivia asked him for help with a school project. He went upstairs with her. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsing plates that didn't need rinsing, my mind replaying that phone call over and over again. Roy spoke gently, too gently. Then tell us how it happened. What did that mean? What did he know? And how long had he known it? When he came back downstairs, he didn't go to the couch like he usually did. He walked past me, paused just slightly at the edge of the kitchen, and said, We should do something next week. I turned, caught off guard. What? A dinner, he said. Invite both families. It's been a while. My stomach dropped. Both families, I repeated. My parents, yours, he said. Then, after a beat, and Travis. There it was. Not accusation. Not confrontation. An invitation. Wrapped in something I didn't yet understand. I forced a smile. Yeah, that sounds nice. Nice. That's the word I chose. Because I was still playing the version of myself that believed I could talk my way through anything. Graham nodded. Good, he said, I'll make the reservations. Then he walked away. Like the decision had already been made. Like my agreement hadn't mattered. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. Steady. Even. Controlled. I turned my head slightly, watching him in the dark, trying to read something in his face. Anything. But there was nothing there. No tension. No anger. No visible crack in the man I had built my life around. If anything, he looked peaceful. And for the first time in 17 years, that terrified me. Because peace in Graham had always meant certainty, and I had the sudden, overwhelming feeling that whatever certainty he had reached, it did not include me. The dinner was set for June 14th. 17 years to the day since our wedding. I didn't realize it at the time. Or maybe I did, and I chose not to think about it. Either way, the date settled into place like something inevitable. The week leading up to it felt normal on the surface. School runs, groceries, laundry. Travis texted twice. I answered once. Short, careful. He didn't seem to notice the difference. Of course he didn't. Travis had always lived in the moment. Consequences were something that happened to other people. By Thursday, the tension in my chest had turned into something sharper. Not quite panic. Not quite clarity. Just pressure. Like something building. Friday night, Graham came home with a small bag from a boutique I didn't recognize. He handed it to me without ceremony. A dress, he said, for tomorrow. I blinked. You bought me a dress? It's our anniversary, he said simply. Of course it was. 17 years. And I hadn't even bought him a card. I opened the bag. The dress was beautiful. Elegant. Understated. The kind of thing he always chose. Something that made me look like the version of myself he believed in. I love it, I said. And I meant that part. Because even then, even with everything hanging in the air, some part of me still responded to his care like it was safe to accept it. Good, he said. Then he turned away. No smile. No warmth. Just completion. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, long after he had gone to bed, holding the dress against my body, trying to see myself the way he did, the woman he married, The woman he trusted. The woman he thought I still was. I couldn't find her. Not clearly. Not anymore. Saturday came too fast. The house was clean. The kids were dressed. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. And underneath it all, something was about to break. I just didn't know yet that Graham had already decided how. The restaurant was too elegant for something ordinary. That was the first thought I had when we pulled into the valet lane. Graham stepped out of the car, handed over the keys, and walked around to open my door like he always did. That small, consistent gesture, the one I had stopped noticing years ago, felt deliberate now, measured. Like everything else about him. "Ready?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked. Dark suit, no tie, clean lines, composed. If there was anything beneath the surface, he had sealed it so tightly it didn't leak through, even at the edges. "For dinner?" I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "Of course." He nodded once, then offered me his arm. I took it, because that's what I had been doing for 17 years, taking what he offered without questioning what it cost him. Inside, the host greeted Graham by name. Of course he did. Graham planned things. Not casually. Not halfway. He had reserved a private room. That was the second thing that should have made me stop. But I didn't. I smiled. I thanked the host. I walked in like I belonged there. The room was already half full. My parents sat on one side of the table, my mother adjusting her napkin, my father checking his watch like punctuality was a moral principle. Graham's parents sat across from them. His mother, Elaine, looked up the moment we entered and smiled. Warm, open, familiar. That smile would not survive the night. Travis was there too, leaning back in his chair, one ankle resting on his knee, wearing a jacket that didn't quite fit the setting, but somehow still looked intentional on him. He caught my eye, smirked slightly. That same smirk. 17 years and it hadn't changed. For a second, just a second, I felt the old pull. Then Graham's hand settled lightly at my back, and it disappeared. We greeted everyone. Polite, normal, predictable. If anyone noticed the tension inside me, they didn't say it. Maybe because there was no visible tension yet. Not on the surface. Dinner began the way all family dinners begin. Drinks were ordered. Menus opened. Small talk filled the space. My mother asked about the kids' schedules. Elaine complimented the restaurant. My father made a comment about traffic. Graham participated just enough. Answered when spoken to. Listened when others talked. Watched everything. Travis told a story about work. Half true. Probably less. People laughed. I laughed too. Because that's what I had always done. Kept the surface smooth, even when the structure underneath it was collapsing. Halfway through the appetizers, Graham stood. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just stood. The room shifted. Not visibly, but everyone felt it. "I wanted to say something," he said. His voice was calm, even. The same tone he used when explaining project timelines or discussing school schedules. Nothing about it suggested what was coming. "I know this wasn't planned as anything more than a family dinner," he continued, "but 17 years is significant." 17. The number landed heavier now. I thought it deserved acknowledgement. Elaine smiled again. My mother nodded. Of course. Anniversary speech. That made sense. That fit. Graham reached down beside his chair and lifted a small box. Mahogany. Polished. Wrapped in gold paper with a thin ribbon tied neatly across the top. My breath caught. Jewelry. That's what I thought. Of course that's what I thought. Because even now, part of me believed I was still living inside the version of my life where I deserved gifts like that. He walked around the table, slow, unhurried, every step controlled, every eye following him. Then he stopped beside me, held the box out. "Happy anniversary, Vanessa." I smiled, because there were people watching, because that was the role, because I didn't know how to do anything else. "Thank you," I said softly. I took the box. It was heavier than I expected. That should have meant something. It didn't. I untied the ribbon, carefully, because Graham always noticed details like that, because I had learned to perform gratitude in ways that matched his attention to effort. The paper came off smoothly. The lid lifted easily, and for 1 second, just one, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. 3 folders, cream-colored, thick paper, clipped together. Not jewelry. Not anything that belonged in a box like this. "What is this?" I asked, the smile still on my face, still automatic. "Open it," Graham said. Same tone, same calm. No edge, no anger, nothing to prepare me. So I opened it. The first page was a lab report. DNA. Names. Numbers. Percentages. Words that rearranged the entire structure of my life in less than a second. I stared at it. Didn't understand it. Then did. All at once. My hands went cold. The room tilted. And still, no one else knew yet. They were watching me. Waiting. expecting. "What is it?" my mother asked. I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. So Graham answered for me. "Paternity tests," he said. Simple, clear, final. The room went silent. Not gradually, completely. Like sound itself had been removed. 3 of them, he continued. 1 for each child. No one spoke. No one moved. They all came back the same. He paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. 0%. My father frowned. My mother's hand froze halfway to her glass. Elaine stopped breathing. And Travis went still. For the first time since I had known him. Still. "They're not mine," Graham said. Not loud, not angry. Just true. The words landed in the center of the table and shattered everything they touched. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was nothing left to say that wasn't already written on those pages. Elaine's voice broke the silence. "How long?" she asked. Not to Graham. To me. "How long have you known?" Her eyes were on me now. Sharp. Focused. Demanding. I swallowed. My throat dry. "Marlene, please." "How long?" she repeated. No softness left. No warmth. Just clarity. I closed my eyes. For a second. Because I had spent 17 years avoiding this exact moment. And now it was here. There was no version of the truth that would hurt less. "Since the beginning," I said. The words felt like glass. Each time, a sound left her. Not a scream. Something quieter. More dangerous. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor loud enough to echo. "I held those babies," she said, her voice shaking now. Controlled, but barely. I stood in hospital rooms and thanked God for my grandchildren. Her eyes filled, not with tears, with something harder. "They're not my grandchildren." I didn't answer, because there was no answer. "There's no biologically here," she continued when I tried to speak. "Don't you dare make this smaller than it is." She picked up her purse, turned to Graham, and in a voice completely different, soft, broken, she said something too quiet for me to hear. Then she kissed his forehead and walked out, just like that, gone. Graham's father followed, but before he left, he stopped at the door, turned, looked directly at me. "My son deserved better," he said. 1 sentence. Then he was gone too. My parents didn't speak. My father placed cash on the table, stood, walked out. My mother followed, not once looking at me. Not once. 17 years of family, erased in under 5 minutes. Travis stood last, slow, careful, like movement itself required thought now. He didn't look at me. Not once. Not even when he passed my chair. He walked to the door, opened it, and left. No explanation. No defense. No acknowledgement. 17 years. And he walked out like I was nothing more than a situation he no longer wanted to be involved in. That was the moment I understood something I should have known years ago. I had destroyed my life for a man who wouldn't even stay long enough to watch it collapse. When the door closed behind him, the room felt empty. Too large. Too quiet. Only 2 people left. Me. And Graham. He sat down across from me. Calm. Composed. Untouched by the chaos he had just created. Or maybe not untouched. Maybe just finished. "There's more," he said. He reached into the box. Pulled out another document. Thicker. Stapled. Legal. I didn't want to look at it. I already knew. Divorce. Filed. Prepared. Complete. "I filed 6 weeks ago," he said. 6 weeks. While I was living my life. While I was still lying. While I was still believing I had control. "I reviewed the prenup," he continued. Page 11. My stomach dropped. Because suddenly, I remembered, not the words, but the moment, the office, the pen, the way I hadn't read past the first few pages because I thought it didn't matter. "It's enforceable," he said. Still calm, still precise. "You forfeit everything. The house, the accounts, support, all of it, gone. And reimbursement," he added. Quietly. 17 years. The number again. Always the number. I stared at him. Finally. Really saw him. Not the man I had married. Not the man I had manipulated. Not the man I had taken for granted. The man I had created by destroying him. "You planned this," I whispered. He didn't deny it. "I verified it," he said. Not planned. Verified. Like this was a process. A project. A structure he had dismantled piece by piece. "You could have just left," I said. The word sounded weak even to me. Small. Meaningless. "I could have," he agreed. Then, I didn't think that was enough. Not angry. Not loud. Just final. "I gave you 17 years," he continued. "You can give me 1 evening." That was it. That was the entire explanation. 17 years. For 1 night. A perfect exchange. Balanced. Precise. Unavoidable. I looked down at the papers again. At the numbers. The proof. The end of everything I had built on lies. And for the first time since the box opened, I didn't feel like arguing, or explaining, or minimizing. Because there was nothing left to protect. Only something left to understand. This wasn't something that had happened to me. This was something I had built, carefully, patiently, day by day, until the structure was complete. And then he exposed it, all at once.